May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? My name is son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yeshon. I'd like to serve you as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to. It's now time for sons and daughters now entering sanctuary. It's time to turn it over to the next speaker.
So welcome everyone, you may be seated. The peace of Yahweh be reaching every one of you. The time of my speech is blessed are those who keep his laws. Please turn to Revelation 22, 12, and 14. Found on page 986. Behold, I come quickly, my reward is with me. Blessed are those who keep his laws, that they may have the right to enter into the tree of life, and may enter and throughout the gates into the city. Only those who keep his laws of Yahweh will have this blessing of eternal life in Yahweh's kingdom. Yahweh tells us that we have a choice. It's up to us whether we want to choose life and be in Yahweh's kingdom or choose death. It's a scriptural fact that if we choose to break Yahweh's laws or continue breaking Yahweh's laws of righteousness, we are only choosing death and destruction, because life comes by practicing righteousness. Please turn to Deuteronomy 30:19, found on page 173. I call heaven and earth as witnesses again to this day. Life and death have set before you, life and death, blessings and curses. Therefore choose life so both you and your children may live. It's our choice. Each one of us has a choice to make the decision to choose righteousness by keeping Yahweh's laws. We make this choice every day, all day long. Every time we decide to practice self-control and listen to our teachers and authorities, then we will think before we act, and we make a right choice, that is choosing righteousness. And Yahweh is looking at the effort we are putting into making the right choices. Even children can make the right choices when they are taught the laws of Yahweh. In the House of Yahweh we are taught. We have sermons and classes and prophetic word magazines and the newsletters. We have so many ways that Yahweh can choose to put these laws in our hearts and minds if we just take the choice to study. Please turn to Deuteronomy 13, 12, and 14. For this law which I command you this day is not hidden from you, nor is it beyond your reach. It is not up in heaven, so that you have to ask who will assign it up in heaven for us and bring it to us, so that we may hear it and then do it. Nor is it beyond the sea, so that you have to ask who will cross the sea and bring it to us, so that we may hear and then do it. The law is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so you may obey it. And when we do obey the laws of Yahweh, we receive the reward Yahweh promises. Blessed are those who keep His laws, for they will have the right to enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. May Yahweh bless your understanding. I like to turn to Sonny Yisrayl Hawkins with prayer.
If y'all remain standing, I'd like to turn over to the first speaker, son of Yisrayl, Deacon David Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We've got something special in store for you today. As you know, we've all been called in these last days to become kings and queens here in Yahweh's house, in the house of Yahweh. And we know that Yahweh has not called out many wise or noble according to this world, the criteria of the world. And you know, the world doesn't recognize us at this time as much of anything. We are the lowest of the low. You know, we have nothing to boast of. We can't boast of any type of greatness, that we were something great when we came here by any means. But Yahweh is making us into something great. And Yahweh's the one who makes this possible. Now, last week we heard from the queens of the house of Yahweh, and today we're going to hear from some of the kings of the house of Yahweh. You know, they came to Yahweh's house in peculiar circumstances and trials, and for one reason or another. You know, everyone has like a different story. But one thing that unifies all this group and actually the queens of the house of Yahweh also is that we've come seeking peace. That's what we wanted in our lives. That's what was missing, and we've come seeking this great peace that Yahweh has to offer. So to move along, the first person that we're going to hear from today, after myself, is Deacon Yeshua Diorio Hawkins, and he's from Atlanta, Georgia. Now, Deacon Yeshua came looking for peace Passover 2012. He liked what he saw and heard, and came back and was baptized on Omer 49, 2012, just in time for Pentecost. He's been learning this peaceful way to live for 6 years now, and he's very involved in the work in every way that he can be, and it's great to have him here. Now, the next person you'll hear from after that is Deacon Daniel DePass from Brooklyn, New York. Deacon Daniel DePass Hawkins from Brooklyn, New York. And now this is interesting because he came with his parents when he was 6 months old. Yep. But even at that young age, he was able to start learning Yahweh's way, how to base his life according to Yahweh's laws. He was baptized at 10 years old during tabernacles. And he's been a great example for all the other young men in Yahweh's house for this last 23 years. So now this next one, we've got a little bit of an old-timer with us, okay? Deacon Micaiah Meisner Hawkins from Wisconsin. I think the town was called Michikat. Now, Deacon Micaiah has added to his store of knowledge year after year, feast after feast, for the last, get this, for the last 31 years. That is a long time. Since 1987, this man has been learning Yahweh's way and able to share it with other people, and is quite stable in Yahweh's house. The next person you'll hear from the gang-ridden streets of Chicago, comes Deacon Ananiah McGee Hawkins. Now, this man has witnessed in person what many of us have only seen in the nightly news and in the news we see on Sabbath. And Deacon Ananiah realized life shouldn't be like this. I mean, it was horrible. Now, he heard of a place where there were no gangs and where there were no murders. And this has been proven, actually, in different studies that have been done also. But here at Abel, at the house of Yahweh, that is a truth. Now, 14 years ago, he started learning the perfect laws of Yahweh, and he's highly involved in teaching those laws right now to the young men and to the congregation as much as he can. The next one is the great doctor of music, Deacon Michael Ossoff Hawkins from Lincoln, Nebraska. And, you know, Deacon Michael kept wondering why his prayers weren't being answered. You know, praying steadily, but no prayers being answered. So he heard about the House of Prayer in Abelin, Texas. And he left his successful music career and brought his prayers with him and has been getting them answered daily since 1997. Wow. Now, after that, we're going to hear from some of the great Kohans. Kohan David DePass Hawkins from Brooklyn, New York. Now, he heard that the Creator actually had a name. Imagine that. And he heard it from the House of Yahweh, and he heard that the Creator's name was Yahweh. And he read the House of Yahweh Established, the Two Witnesses, and the rest of the booklets, and more of the books. And he started meeting with the great Kohan Gedalia at his apartment with a small group in 1995, was baptized at the Feast of Tabernacles in 1995, and has been a great addition to the House of Yahweh in learning and teaching peace ever since. All right, now the next one will be, this man, about 2 weeks before Pentecost in 1997, Kohan Kiefer Reynolds left Virginia Beach. He was from Huntington Beach, California, but he left Virginia Beach, where he had been living, to come to the House of Yahweh, where there's not a beach, and to be with other people, get this, who hated Christmas and wanted to keep the laws of Yahweh. Well, he found that at the House of Yahweh and decided to call this place home. He did it 21 years ago today, and you'll be able to hear from him and how he's been able to remain strong in Yahweh's house and endure. Finally, we're going to hear from Kohan Yeshua Hyler Hawkins. He came from Hickory, North Carolina as a teenager with his family. And he saw that the laws of Yahweh were real and true, and he wanted to call this place home also. So in 1996, he moved to the House of Yahweh and started learning Yahweh's great way. He became deacon and then priest, and of course is one of the pillars here in Yahweh's house today. Praise Yahweh. So I kind of added this up, and all these men combined, if you add them all together, we're over 150 years of righteousness being taught, okay? And these kings of the House of Yahweh, are enduring with much patience, enduring until, the last day. So, and even beyond. But now remember, not everyone is called out right now. Sometimes only one from a family. And we have to remember that. And of course, we've got to consider that 3 out of 4 fall away. If you'll turn to Yachanan Mark 4, that's on page 763. And this is the parable of the sower. And let's go ahead and move right to verse 14 on page 763. The sower sows the word, the law, and the prophets, and this is the explanation of the parable of the sower. Those by the wayside are those in whom the word, the law, and the prophets is sown, but when they've heard, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word, the law, and the prophets that was sown in their hearts. Now, all these men that have been here so long are past that point at this time. And so you come to the next step, and in the same way, the ones sown upon stony ground are those when they have heard the word, the law, and the prophets, immediately receive it with gladness. But because of no root in themselves, they endure for only a short time. Now afterward, when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, the law, and the prophets, immediately they are offended. Then there are those who are sown among thorns. They hear the word, the law, and the prophets, but the cares, anxieties, and distractions of this world, or the deceitful attractiveness of riches. Remember that, young men. The deceitful attractiveness of riches, or the lust for other things, begin to creep in and choke the word. And the word is the law and the prophets that are being taught to you, and it becomes unfruitful. And then these are the ones who are sown on rich ground. They hear the word, the law, and the prophets. They accept it. They produce fruit, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100-fold. And what we want to remember is to not throw our opportunity away. If you'll turn to page 970, that's Yada. And let's look at verse 5 through 6. It's talking about those who fall away from the truth. Therefore, I want to put you in remembrance, though you already know this, that Yahweh, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. And the Malachim who did not keep their first estate, get that? They did not keep their first estate. The joy and everything that they received the message with gladness, and they were very thankful. But then they did not keep their first estate. They left their own habitation. Well, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness and the sentencing of the great day. So let's remember not to leave our first estate, please. Kings and queens of the house of Yahweh, let's remain strong. You're here. You've been through so many tests and trials, and we're right here at the end. Don't throw your opportunity away. And if you all please stand. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce to you our first speaker, the great deacon Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. I want to get right into this today. I want to talk to you about value. But before we get started, if you want to put a title to this, you could call this, What Does Yahweh Value? That was, what does Yahweh value? So, first off, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program says that values are what we believe in or feel strongly about. They go a long way into deciding and developing our character. In fact, on page 28 of the acceptance unit, it says simply that value, we're talking value now, is to consider important or worthy. So take a minute and consider that. Value is to consider important or worthy. That word worthy, we're going to talk about that a lot. But I want to talk about how we value ourselves and each other. I want to start by asking three questions. How much value does Yahweh place in man? That question was, how much value does Yahweh place in man, as like mankind? Number two, how much value does Yahweh value his elect, the called out ones? How much value does Yahweh place on the elect, his called out ones? And then finally, how much do we value ourselves and each other? How much do we value ourselves and each other? I want to start by looking at the environment Yahweh has created for mankind. So if you could turn to Genesis 2, we're going to be looking at verses 9, 16, and 17. These are very familiar scriptures. So Genesis 2:9 says, "And out of the ground Yahweh made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and desirable for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil was in the midst also." So this is the environment that we're speaking of, the place that Yahweh has created for us. In verse 16 it says, "And Yahweh commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. But of the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil you must not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." So Yahweh provided this perfect place for man and shown man the way. All man had to do was be humble and obey. And when I say a perfect place, that place is different today. We because of sin and deception that was allowed to come into the world, and the fact that Yahweh was only looking for a small group of people at that time, the curse as it is, we live with the curse every day. The curse is disease, it's war, it's earthquakes, hurricanes, natural disasters, or what they call natural disasters, and all these other things. It's so much so that we as a group can't even imagine a world without the curse. So it's hard to imagine how perfect this place was in the very beginning. So keep in mind, sin was in the universe before man was created. Let that sink in. The sin was here before man was created. Let's take a look at a quote from the 10th book of Israel. This is from the 10th book of Israel, part 1, chapter 12, verse 2. This comes from Yeshua's memorial on 3/29/10. And this is a direct quote from Pastor. It says, it was because of sin that mankind, sin in the universe, that mankind was created. So mankind was created because there was sin in the universe. That's going to be important. Think about it. We were given the ability to change from one path to another. We were the only part of creation that had the ability to once you made a wrong choice to be able to change your mind and do something different. So Yahweh has created this perfect place for man and given man a perfect way to live. Of course, deception came in and clouded the minds of most men. But Yahweh preordained us, the called out ones, and to be called out and have the opportunity to choose, to be informed of the truth and take hold of the calling. And I want to make a point here. When we were called out and we came to this place, we had just a little bit of information. We didn't have the whole knowledge. We didn't have the ability to make a choice and decide, this is definitely where I want to be, or no, this isn't the place I want to be. That takes time and study and effort and determination. And you applying yourself to give yourself the opportunity to actually grow and learn so you can make an informed decision. Nobody else in the world has the ability to make an informed decision. In other words, we are offered this great reward for following through with what we were created for. Like where it says in Genesis 1:26, in the image and likeness of Yahweh. We were created in His image, but we have to be like Him. We can't just come here and be here for a year and think that, I'm like Him now, I can go do something else. Because if that's the case, you've been deceived. You allowed yourself to not follow the instruction. But what is this reward we keep hearing about? If you turn with me to Psalms 8. We're going to go to Psalms 8. I'll give you a page number in just a moment. You're going to be on page 437. Psalms 8, 4 through 8. So this is also very, very familiar. So verses 4 through 8. I'll give you a moment to get there. Because the words here are important. The pastor keeps telling us when we study, we need to be looking at these words and maybe look up words that we find. But it says, starting in verse 4, it says, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the Malachim, but you will crown him with glory and honor. You made man to be the ruler over the works of your hands. You will put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yes, all the beasts of the field, all the fowls of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whatever passes through the rivers and the seas will be under the rule of man. This right here is talking as if man's going to be given the earth. All that was created on the earth was going to be given to man. And keep this in mind, this was all created for the elect, as it is described in all aspects of the earth. And there's another scripture. It's in Hebrews 2. So if you could turn to Hebrews 2, it's almost the exact same thing, but it is a little different. Hebrews 2. And we're going to be looking at 5 through 8. Hebrews 2, verses 5 through 8. I'll give you a moment to get there. It's on, it's on page 943. So, verses 5 through 8. So it says, for it is not to the Malachim that he has subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking. For one brings testimony in a certain place, saying, what is man, that you are mindful of him, or the son of man, that you visit him? You made him a little lower than the Malachim. You crowned him with glory and honor, and did set him over the works of your hands. You have put all things in subjection under his feet, and putting everything in subjection under him. Yahweh left nothing that is not subject to him. But at this time, we do not see all things under him. So he's talking about everything. He's putting everything, the entire universe. So how much value does Yahweh have for man? Yahweh knew us before we were ever created, and created the universe and saw the value in us, or better yet, considered us worthy. Deuteronomy 7:6. I've got to hurry. So Deuteronomy 7:6. Okay, Deuteronomy 7:6. It says, for you are a people holy to your Father. Yahweh your Father has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all other people on the face of the earth. So we're a special treasure. We'll look at this real quick, and I mean real quick. Yeah. Okay. So it says, definition of special is better, greater, otherwise different from what is usual. The synonyms are exceptional, noteworthy, remarkable, outstanding, unique. The definition of treasure now, a quantity of precious metals, gems, or other valuable objects. The verb is keep carefully, a valued or valued item. And I want to get to another scripture real quick. It's 1 Kepha 2, 4 through 7, and I've got to wrap it up here very quickly. And 2, 4 through 7 says, coming to him as to a living stone, indeed rejected by men, but chosen by Yahweh and precious. You also, as living stones, are being built up into a spiritual house, the house of Yahweh, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices accepted to Yahweh through Yeshua Messiah. Therefore, it is also contained in Scripture, behold, I lay in Zion, chief cornerstone elect, precious, and he who believes in him will by no means be put to shame. Let's look at precious. Precious, of an object, substance, or resource of great value, not to be wasted or treated carelessly, used as a term of address to a beloved person. So, in closing, keep in mind, and for your notes, Matthew 13:44, where the man hid the treasure in the field. We are that treasure that Yahweh has hidden in a field. We are his treasure. With this, I hope you can now answer the question of how much Yahweh values each and every one of us. Also, that every one of us is worthy of being here and being part of this great reward and opportunity that Yahweh has put in front of us. With all this in mind, we need to take our calling more seriously now than ever before. Get involved in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. Use it to start correcting our character. We have to learn to accept ourselves as well as each other. Yahweh values us. He has called out ones above all else. His plan shows it, as we are the only ones with the whole truth and the ability to make a right choice. We need to be doing everything in our power to humble ourselves to the authority that Yahweh has placed over us. Our great teacher and overseer, Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins. May Yahweh bless your understanding and continue striving for your reward. Thank you. With this, I'd like to turn the services over to the great deacon, Daniel DePass Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. It is truly a great honor and privilege to speak before the called out ones of the House of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The title of my speech today is, It May Be Hard, But We Can Do It. And the purpose of my speech is to acknowledge that achieving eternal life and keeping Yahweh's laws in these last days is one of the hardest things we'll ever be able to accomplish. But with obedience and studying Yahweh's information from the house of Yahweh, we will be able to endure until the end. So again, I'd like to emphasize as my first point, the hardest thing we would ever be able to accomplish in these last days is to qualify for eternal life and to enter into Yahweh's kingdom, to be a part of Yahweh's righteous family of priests. My first reference here, I'm going to use the character unit. Character unit, Peaceful Solution Character Unit. And this is going to be found on page 4. We're going to be looking at the first paragraph. And the reason why I'm going to the character unit is we're going to figure out what everybody here is made of. You know, every man, woman, and child has character, and our character is our foundation. This is where all of our thoughts, emotions, feelings, everything comes from. So the first paragraph, it reads, our character defines what is important to us, what we believe in, and how we treat others just as clearly as our faces and voices define who we are physically. In fact, our character is an integral part of who we are, whether the character we have is positive or negative. And this is the most important part, because positive meaning the keeping of Yahweh's laws and negative meaning the breaking of Yahweh's laws. It depends on many different factors. These factors include genetics, family values, influences, experiences, choices, and the environment. Together, they help to mold and shape our character. So let's look at all those factors that help to form and shape our character. Our genetics, our family values, our influences, and our choices are all influenced greatly by the 6,000 years of mankind sinning. You know, they had an opportunity to keep Yahweh's laws, but as we can see, only one was able to keep it perfectly, and that was Yeshua Messiah. So all of our ancestors have the hatred, the violence, the illegal lust, the disobedience to Yahweh's laws, and the practicing of sin. And that greatly influences our character, that greatly influences how we make our choices and our decision making. However, it's important to realize even through all of that, we can endure. It may be hard, but we can do it. Our environment and our experiences, you know, they are greatly influenced by the ways of sin as well. As we talked about the 6,000 years of sin, Revelation 12 verse 9 for your notes shows that the sin has reached its peak, you know, and Satan has deceived the whole world, and that's the reason why our experiences and our environment, even if we're born and raised in the house of Yahweh, all of that can influence us to sin and has a really big impact on us following Yahweh's laws. So along with all of these factors that impact our character, Yahweh shows through Scripture that we are born with the desire to sin. Yes, we are born with the desire and the inclination to break Yahweh's laws. First, I'd like to cover the heart. It can be found on Jeremiah 17 verses 9 through 10, and that's page 587 in your book of Yahweh. Jeremiah 17 verses 9 through 10, it reads, "The heart is deceitful above all things, desperately wicked." Who can know it? That's desperately wicked. Something in us is trying and striving our greatest effort to sin. I, Yahweh, search the heart. Verse 10, I, Yahweh, search the heart and test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. And when you think about the tests, you can reference the scripture Exodus 20 verse 20, and that's the testing and the trials that we constantly have to go through. And Yahweh put us through this and is allowing us to go through this because he wants to see if we're going to keep Yahweh's laws and choose to keep Yahweh's laws even when all the circumstances are gearing us and conditioning our mind to sin. Next, we have the carnal mind. That's found on Romans 8 verse 6 through 7, page 879 in your book of Yahweh. Romans 8 verses 6 through 7, it reads, "For to be carnally minded is death, and to be spiritually minded is life and peace." And spiritually minded is not just spirit or what the world teaches as a ghost or a gas or anything like that, but it means the laws of Yahweh. That's found in Yachanan 6 verse 63, and the fruits of the Spirit are found in Galatians 5 verse 22 to 23 for your notes. Verse 7, "But to be carnally, because the carnal mind is enmity against, bitterly opposed to Yahweh, for it is not subject to the law, nor indeed can be." So we have to remove the carnal mind. We have to take out the carnal mind and replace it with a mind of spirit that desires to keep Yahweh's laws. But we're born and we have this desire to sin, this carnal mind. And that desire to sin is found in Genesis 4 verse 7. That's found on page 3 in your book of Yahweh. It reads, Yahweh is telling Cain and asking him, "Why are you angry? Why are you downcast?" And he shows him this is what is found within us, but we have to overcome it. He reads in Genesis 4 verse 7, it reads, "If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do righteousness, sin is crouching at your door. The desire to sin is with you, but you must overcome it." So we have the desire to sin, but it's important to recognize that it may be hard, but we can overcome sin. We can practice righteousness. We can practice keeping Yahweh's laws. So back to the character unit on page 4. This is the last paragraph, the last 2 sentences. It shows the important thing to remember, though, is that your character and personality are not fixed like your skin and eye color. Yes, we have fixed traits, but our character and personality, namely our character, can be changed and developed as you experience and learn new things. When we're in the house of Yahweh, we're experiencing and learning the laws of Yahweh. That means our character can change to a positive one that emphasizes on the peaceful solution and on character and building positive character traits. Praise Yahweh. Hebrews 8 verse 10, That's found on page 947 in the book of Yahweh. Hebrews 8 verse 10 shows Yahweh will bring forth this plan in us. For this covenant is the same covenant that I will renew with the house of Israel after those days. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, minds, and I will be their father and they will be my people. How is Yahweh going to write these things in our hearts and our minds? Okay, so here we have the study guide, and we're going to learn these laws and prophecies and change our character by studying Yahweh's laws, studying Yahweh's word. And I have a quick story here on the study guide. When I was younger, I didn't really like to study. I would listen to the sermon tapes, come to Sabbath services, but I would prefer to do other things. When my father introduced to me the study guide, that's when I was like, wait a minute, see this big book over here? How am I going to get through this? I'm not going to really, put much time into this. I want to put more time into running around and playing with my friends. But, when I got into the studies in the study guide, it shows that, with the booklets, the true stories about Christmas, the Apostle Shaul, did he do away with the laws? It shows that Yahweh inspired Pastor to put time and effort and emphasis in keeping Yahweh's laws and teaching Yahweh's laws and putting it here for us to study and practice and learn. So this is how we're going to get the laws in our hearts and in our minds and change that carnal mind and that heart that's desperately wicked to righteousness. In conclusion, I like to look at 1 Corinthians 15 verse 58. That's found on page 899. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 58. It reads, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of Yahweh, knowing that your labor is not in vain in him. Remember, it isn't easy, but Yahweh tells us we can overcome and accomplish his plan. So continue to study and focus on accomplishing the work of Yahweh, and do not throw this wonderful opportunity away. It is irreplaceable." It's irreplaceable. And with that, I'd like to please stand. Everyone please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, a great friend and a great deacon, the great deacon Micaiah Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. My title today is "The Lot Says It All." So please bear with me. I'm going a little fast today. I have a lot to cover. We are all familiar with the 12th book of Israel, part 1, chapter 2, verse 59, where Pastor talks about a white stone with the numbers 17, 28, 74 on it. And Yahweh told him, "This is your lot." Each letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a number. Across the top of the table, right to left, beginning with 1 for Aleph, 2 for Beit, 3 for Gimel, and so on. Down the right side of the table, 10 start with the letter Yod, 10 for Yod, 20 for Kaf, 30 for Lamed, and so on. The House of Yahweh used this method in the Holy Garments book. Page 13 to 14, the Hebrew Gematria for Yahweh's name is 10-5-6-5, which you all know, for Yod, He, Wah, He. So instead of looking the numbers up in Strong's, we will look up the Hebrew words in the lexicons, letter by letter, for the meaning of the actual words. Using this method, if you take Pastor's lot numbers, 17, 28, 74, and change them back into the Hebrew letters, and look up the resulting words in the Hebrew lexicons, you will find some very interesting things. May I have my first slide, please? Pastor's 3 lot numbers are 3 distinct Hebrew words. 17 is Yaz, 28 is Kach, 74 is Od. May I have my next slide, please? Since Hebrew is written and read right to left, let's start with 74. May I have my next slide, please? 74 is the Hebrew word Od. According to a compendious Hebrew grammar by M.H. Breslow, Od means witness. A Manual Hebrew and English Lexicon by Josiah Gibbs. Od means a witness, testimony, a commander. In other words, a leader, a teacher. Another interesting thing, a compendious Hebrew lexicon by Samuel Pike shows it means witness, but it also shows there are a number of Hebrew words that are derived from the word witness, including adi, mouth, od, a particle denoting standing or continuance of a person, standing, remember that, ya'ad, to appoint by proper authority, an appointed congregation, and mo'ad, a set time, a feast. So 74 is od, which means a witness, and to witness or testify. This is speaking of the one who witnesses for Yahweh. May I have my next slide? 28 is the Hebrew word kach. Next slide. In English and Hebrew lexicon by Michael Josephs says it means ability, power. The Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew and English lexicon to the Old Testament says it's used in Psalm 29 verse 4. The voice of Yahweh is with power, is powerful. Gesenius Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament by Francis Brown says strength, power is in this word. So 28 is kach, which signifies ability and power. Another way of saying this, he carries the authority of Yahweh. He comes with Yahweh's authority, power, strength, might, the teaching of the law and the prophets. Is this a coincidence, House of Yahweh? Next slide. 17 is the Hebrew word yaz. Next slide. The Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Benjamin Davidson, page 305, says this word yaz is the future third person singular masculine apocryphated form of yazah from naza. Now, did you catch that? It's future third person singular masculine, the shortened form of a word. This means one man in the future will do something. He's going to do something. He shall nazah. What's he going to do? Let's find out. A Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament by William Gesenius Edward Robinson says this word means to leap for joy, to exult, to make rejoice. To make rejoice. It actually means he will exult, he will bring forth rejoicing. Pastor spoke about the word exalt in the 15th book of Israel, chapter 35, verse 100. Exalt, this word exalt means to leap up. Ah boy, that's what I seek to do right now, to leap for joy, to be extremely joyful, rejoice, seek Yahweh's house. Deuteronomy says, there you must go and there you will learn to rejoice. But wait, there's more to this word than just bringing forth rejoicing. Next slide, please. According to Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament by Samuel P. Trageles, nazah means to leap, to exult with joy, to be sprinkled. According to a Hebrew lexicon by W.H. Barker, page 118, to be sprinkled. A compendious Hebrew grammar by M.H. Breslaw says to sprinkle. Lingua Sacra by David Levi, volume 5, says the Hebrew word nazah means to sprinkle the water of purification upon them. Numbers 8, verse 7. This is speaking of the sprinkling of the water of the ashes of the red heifer. A compendious and complete Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament, chiefly founded on the works of Gesenius and first edited by Benjamin Davies, says, but many, not inaptly, render it, he shall sprinkle. He will sprinkle. This word is used in Numbers 8:7, Numbers 19, verses 18, 19, and 21, and is used for the sprinkling of the water of the ashes of the red heifer. So we see this word both means he will bring forth rejoicing and he will sprinkle. Next slide, please. Altogether, the Hebrew of the Lotstone numbers 74, 28, 17 refer to a witness that will come to testify for Yahweh with power, that is authority, coming with the strength of Yahweh, the teaching of the laws and the prophets. He shall bring forth rejoicing, and he will sprinkle with the ashes of the red heifer. This is pastor's lot. Please be turning over to Malachi 3. We'll read 1 through 3 shortly. Pastor brought out this scripture in the first book of Israel, chapter 26, about the messenger that it talks about in this chapter. And that it's actually a man called Yisrayl. Gesenius shows that. Next slide, if you'd show, please. Malach, one sent, according to Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, one sent a messenger of Israel as being the messenger of Yahweh and the teacher of the Gentiles. The Hebrew word Gentiles is the Hebrew word nations. So it's our teacher of the nations. Malachi 3, 1 through 3. Behold, it says, I will send my messenger, Malach, a witness for Yahweh, and he will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly he will come. He will be accessible to his temple, to his house. The ruler whom you are seeking, the messenger, the Malach of the covenant, in whom you delight. There's rejoicing, in other words. Behold, he comes, says Yahweh of hosts. But who may endure the day of his coming? Who will stay in this work he establishes? Who will stay? Not the proud, not the wicked. And who will stand with him in his place when he appears? Who's going to stand with him? For he is like a refiner's fire. This is speaking of the laws of Yahweh. Like a fuller's soap. He's cleaning us up. He will sit, the word means enthroned with authority. If you remember Zechariah 6, 12 through 13, it talks about he will build the house of Yahweh. He'll be a priest upon his throne. Continuing, like a refiner and purifier of silver, he will purify. He's going to purify with the laws the sons of Levi, those who are attached to the priesthood. That's what Levi means. And purge them as gold and silver, so they may offer, that they might be they may be an offering to Yahweh in righteousness. The people, an offering to Yahweh, just like the first Abel, an offering to Yahweh. I would like to leave you with this. Remember Revelation 2:17. He who overcomes will receive a white stone, a sentence of acquittal. And in 12th book of Israel, part 2, chapter 14, verse 66, Pastor tells us, the branch is also prophesied to teach the laws to all nations. That's the white stone that's been given to the house of Yahweh. The witness coming with the strength of Yahweh, the sprinkler, the Malach, the messenger of the covenant, is making us this way, refining us, purifying us, if we are willing and obedient to him. He has the pattern. He's putting it on us. Set your mind in advance. Hold on to your crown. Don't throw away your reward. That's all I have for today. I'll turn the podium over to our next speaker, the great Deacon Ananiah Hawkins.
Shalom. Everybody can please be seated. You can be turning please to page 957 in your books of Yahweh. As I start my title, page 957 in your books of Yahweh. The title of my sermonetto speech today is We Are Being Trained. We are being trained to handle the greatest positions in the universe. Be strong, be faithful, and endure until the end. We are being trained to handle the greatest positions in the universe. Be strong, be faithful, and endure until the end. So I was hoping today, with everything that I'll have the opportunity to cover, Yahweh willing, because taking my own experiences into account and also in listening to some of the things I've heard said by others, it's obvious that the heat is kind of being turned up and we're dealing with pressure. So my hope today is to provide some perspective on that, because as one of the great priests said before, and I think he'll have an opportunity to speak later, understanding what's taking place in our life gives us the edge. Right? Understanding what's taking place in our life gives us the edge. And then, on the opposite, when we don't understand what's taking place, sometimes that can make us vulnerable. So my objective is to try to help with that today, to give perspective to what it is that we're going through. So page 957. All right, give too much preface and end up taking all my time. Page 957. And this will be First Keeper. All right. So, the trials are still going on, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold which perishes, though it is tried with fire, might be found worthy of praise, honor, and glory at the appearing of Yahshua Messiah. So that word right there, trying, is word 1383. Well, trial is word 1883. I don't know if it can get in close enough to be able to see it. Is it? Okay, so it means a testing. It means a testing. By implication, trustworthiness. Trustworthiness. So the things that we're going through, our whole entire trial, is our blessing so much as it allows us the opportunity to prove that we're capable of being trusted. That's why it's taking place, to establish trustworthiness on our behalf. And that's something we know according to what we've learned in the Peaceful Solution Laws of Yahweh, however you prefer to say it. Trust is something that has to be earned. Respect is freely given. Everybody has the right to be respected. But trust is something that has to be earned with right choices. And it's also something that can be lost with wrong choices. So to add further perspective on that, and I say that so we wouldn't take it personal, it's a general principle. Everybody has to earn trust. It isn't just given. We have respect, but the two are different concepts. So to add a little bit more perspective on that, we turn to page 414 and 419. We're going to get two scriptures. Sorry for those who dread that, but it helps. So page 414. Page 414 and page 419. This is to add a little bit more perspective on why it's so necessary for us to establish trustworthiness. 414 and 419. And one of the speakers so far gave us a little bit on it too. 414 and page 419. So Yahshua, which was his true name, Eyob in the book of Yahweh. The King James versions will probably have it Job. But in verse 418, it says, if he does not place trust in his own servants, charging his malachim with error. So this is speaking about those who left their first estate, like the great deacon was speaking of just starting out early. These are people who cannot be trusted. These are people who cannot be trusted because of the choices that they've made. And these are the individuals who we're training now to replace. So it wouldn't make much sense from a logical standpoint for Father Yahweh to replace those who have proven themselves to be untrustworthy with yet more people who cannot be trusted. Especially with the amount of authority and power that's associated with this and the promises that have been made. So looking also, continuing on this same concept, 15:15 is our next one. If Yahweh places no trust, if Father Yahweh, and it's not like he's paranoid. These are people who are unworthy of trust. If Father Yahweh places no trust in his malachim, those who left their first estate, then even the heavens are not pure in his eyes. No, they're defiled. And they're defiled for the exact same reasons that the earth is defiled, right? Because people are practicing sin. So all of that for why it's so very important for us to establish trustworthiness, and why we must all be tested to make right choices in order to earn trust. Speaking further about our trials, if we can get to page 856. Page 856. And this is a familiar scripture for many of us. Page 856, and this will be Acts 14 and verse 22. Acts 14 and verse 22. So they strengthened the minds of the disciples and exhorted them to remain firm in the faith, firm in their trials, and that we must. So that's speaking of something that's indispensable. There's no way to get around it. It's needed. It's a necessary thing. You can't avoid it. That is, and accomplish the goal at the same time. It's needed for the goal. That we must, through much tribulation, enter the kingdom of Yahweh. That word tribulation is word 2347 in Strong's Greek Dictionary. And it means, among other things, affliction and burden. He would not allow us to be burdened with anything beyond what we can bear, so on and so forth. All of those are related concepts. But you see that the word means pressure. We have to be put under great pressure as a part of our training because we're headed for high pressure jobs. So we have to be put under great pressure to see what we're going to do and allow us an opportunity to prove ourselves, as we'll get to in just a moment also. So we must, it is necessary, it is needed that we be trained under high pressure for the jobs that lie ahead of us. Okay. Tying into that, and we'll take two here also, let's turn to page 960. Page 960. Once again, all of this is for perspective's sake. When we understand what's taking place, it gives us the edge. And similarly, or in the opposite, when we don't understand, sometimes it can make us vulnerable. Obedience comes first, though understanding comes later. That's a great mindset to have. But all right, so getting over to 960 and also page, we'll turn back for this one, 905. Oof. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll probably just have to stick with 960 because the clock is ticking away on me. So, on page 960, we're looking at Kepha 4 and verse 12. 4 verse 12. And it says, Beloved, do not be amazed concerning the fiery trial which we must. That goes that speaking about that same thing, about us having to do it. There's no getting around it. It's a necessary and needed part of our training. The fiery trial that we must undergo in order to be tested as though some alien thing were befalling us. Now, that word right there, of our trying, it is word 3986. And all of these could be a conversation in and of itself. But for the sake of time, we're just going to highlight them. And then there's an opportunity afterwards to review them in our own time to study. But we are tested. When we are being tested or when we are being tried, we're being put to the proof, is the first definition provided for that. A putting to proof. We're being put to the proof to show and prove what we will do. Because lip service is not going to suffice. To acknowledge it, to confess it, excellent. In and of itself, however, it is insufficient. It must be accompanied by works. So when we are being tried, we are being given an opportunity to show and prove actually what we will do. When we are provoked is one of the definitions that is offered. We're tried when we are provoked. Provocation. How will we handle provocation? We can say one thing, our actions will show what we will really do. When we are disciplined is another one given. Sorry that it's so small. When we are faced with solicitation. When people are inviting, calling, asking for us to get involved in sin of some sort, how will we handle it? When we experience evil, whatever that may be. And then, of course, even in up times, because positive emotions have to be controlled. So just for perspective's sake, once more, because I have to close here, let's turn over to Psalms. And this is to help with attitude, because attitude is important. Attitude is how we set our minds. So Psalms 119 and 71, that's page 484, and we'll close on this scripture. 484, and we'll close on this scripture. Page 484. Get that quickly. And, 44, 119 and verse 71. So, 119 and 71. It was beneficial for us. It was beneficial for us that we were afflicted. It was beneficial for us that we were afflicted so that we might learn your laws, so that we might develop practical understanding of how to apply your laws. It was beneficial that I went through that I might learn how to conduct myself and handle myself and to make right choices in each and every single one of those examples that we covered before. Provocation, when we're being disciplined, corrected, when we're faced with people trying to pull us into sin with the solicitation, when we're dealing with some sort of evil. The book of Yeshua was a great example of that. And even when we're up, if we aren't careful, we can forget Yahweh. It was beneficial that I was put through all of that I can show and prove what I'm made of and have the opportunity through those experiences, like the great deacon said before, to develop Father Yahweh's character through right choices and earn my trust so that my reputation can be firmly established with the people all throughout the universe, just like Father Yahweh's is. So this is a great opportunity. I encourage everyone to hold on to it. Don't even harbor the thought of quitting. Quitting is off the table. Quitting is not an option. Don't throw it away because it is irretrievable. And with that, I have the great privilege and honor to turn it over to a great deacon in Father Yahweh's house, great deacon Michael House of Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We're going to continue on in these things. I've got a sound bite I'm going to play here real quick. Some of you might shudder to that sound at night. It's a beautiful sound, isn't it? Anybody know what that is? Whippoorwill, yes, whippoorwill. Okay, let me show you a picture real quick. Can you see that? Isn't that just the most beautiful bird? Look at the detail. Look at that. Look at the details in the feathers. Isn't that amazing? Beautiful, beautiful bird. And it's got whiskers, a little beard. The detail that Yahweh put into the bird, we see the same detail that he put into our great teacher Yisrayl Hawkins in training him. Okay, we know that in Yeremiah 1 he talks about before Pastor was formed in the womb, he knew him. He was preparing. He was training and getting ready to get him ready to do his job of bringing peace to the nations. And in Isaiah 45, it talks about twice that he did these things even though he didn't recognize that it was him. So, we see that Yahweh was in control of Pastor's life in so many ways, in more details than any of us can even imagine. But let's look at some of the training that Yahweh put him through in his younger days. One of which was music. Now, Pastor's family was a very musical family. Both Pastor and his brothers, Jacob, Tex, and Vernon, all played instruments. In fact, in one instance, one of his brothers his teacher came from the school and told his dad that he had such talent that he thought he should pursue it. So that you can see that Yahweh was training Pastor in music to be able to deal with music so the righteous music in these last days could be brought forth. And and I started thinking about this, and I looked back to his younger days, and I know Yahweh, we all know Yahweh was training him in different things to prepare him. And then I started looking at one situation that he was in when he was in a rockabilly band. And I thought, you ever notice that in the Texas Monthly and Hard Copy and Brian Ross with ABC News, that they always brought that up and made it look something bad? And I was like, why does Satan always attack that? Well, we know to hack with words was one of the things that she was going to do. So why was she attacking that so much and trying to make him look bad? So I decided that I was going to look up some of the words and some of the things that he was involved with his band, Buffalo Bill and his Whippoorwills. But why was she trying to make it look so bad? So let's see why. As I said, Yahweh had to train Pastor in all these different things to make sure that he was properly trained to lead the house of Yahweh. So she attacked his involvement with music in his younger days as he was being trained. But let's look and see what the Gematria has to say about Buffalo Bill and his whippoorwills, and you're going to be very amazed by this. First, let's start with the whippoorwills. In the Gematria, the whippoorwills is 2369 and comes from 2856. It means to seal, seal up, and marked. And it references the scripture Isaiah 8:16, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, or called out ones. In the English, it's number 1368, and it means, now this is for whippoorwills, strong and mighty helpers. Strong and mighty helpers. Okay? Now in the simple, it's 228, and in the Hebrew it means to be hot. Now I remember the queens of Yisrayl Hawkins of the House of Yahweh spoke last week, and one of the great teachers spoke about being hot for Yahweh. So, and in the Greek, 228 means true, genuine, real, and opposite of the counterfeit. Okay, so that's for whippoorwills. It shows a lot of amazing stuff for the whippoorwills. So I decided to look up Buffalo Bill and the whippoorwills, Buffalo Bill Hawkins and the whippoorwills. Now the Jewish number was 3808, and it meant a little boy, a child, or a young adult. Now Pastor, he was a young adult when him and his brothers formed this group. Okay, they formed it in around 58, 59. And they'd done music in their family, and they did little things, and everybody always encouraged them because of the great talent that they all had to pursue it. So they formed a band, and it was called Buffalo Bill and his Whippoorwills. So they played some events, and they played some certain things, and finally they went down and they played a contest, and where there's a lot of different groups playing, and they won the contest and won the prizes. Shortly after that, they were asked to play a big event, and they played it, and he said they got paid an awful lot of money, and people were encouraging them to continue in this because they said, you're going to go straight to the top. Well, it was at that time that Yahweh had Pastor being trained in only in certain things that you could only be trained in being in a band and touring around, the discipline that comes from it, the songwriting, the knowing of the equipment, how things are staged, how the equipment is run. You can only learn from that type of job, of that type of training. But it got to a point where he saw things taking place, sin taking place, and he said he didn't want any more part of it. So it was at that time Yahweh has almost said that, okay, he's got enough training, let's pull him out of it. So you can see the training that came from that. So as a young adult, he was learning these things. Now in the English for Buffalo Bill and the Whippoorwills, it's 2580, and it means precious and honored. And in the simple, it's 430, and it means mighty Yahweh. Okay, so we know that Pastor was being trained how to lead the music departments, how to instruct us how to write music, how to present the music, what is right, what is not, what is proper, and what should not be done. And he could only get that through training of being involved with a musical group and learning the things that go along with producing music. Now, one thing that really kind of amazed me was I put in the wrong words. I put Buffalo Bill Hawkins and the Whippoorwills. Well, it's Buffalo Bill and his Whippoorwills. Very important. His whippoorwills. So I went back in, I thought, well, the numbers are probably not going to match up, and so I was wrong. I typed in this in the Gematria, and it almost came up the same thing. Buffalo Bill and his whippoorwills, Jewish, in the Gematria 3802, it means shoulder as a support for a burden, but it means the slope of a mountain. At that time, Yahweh was training him. He was going up the slope of the mountain, being trained, so that when he was ready and he got all the training he needed, he would be at the top of the mountain, the high point, the high place, and establish the house of Yahweh. So he was climbing Mount Zion, being trained at that time. So that's why he was on the slope of a mountain. He wasn't at the top yet because he was young and being trained. In the English, it was 2598. And it means dedicated, consecrated, with music. to clothe, or to clothe in righteousness. As we know, he was being trained up. And it comes from 2596, and it means to train up. So we know as he was climbing the slope of the mountain of the house of Yahweh, being prepared to establish the house of Yahweh, he was being raised up, trained up in how to present the music to the people the way Yahweh and Yahshua wanted him to. So he was being trained properly. And in the simple, once again, it meant mighty Yahweh. So it didn't matter whether I typed it wrong or right or not. It still meant what Yahweh needed it to mean. So, the next time you're at home at night and you're studying and you hear that bird going on, and I know there's one brother in particular who shudders because it goes all night long out his window and he can't sleep. Well, remember how Yahweh's using Buffalo Bill Hawkins, Yisrayl Hawkins, and a group of whippoorwills who are strong and mighty helpers of Yahweh, assisting Yisrayl Hawkins in singing out the message of peace in the dark of night that sin has brought upon this world. But the night is almost over, and the day is almost here. Remember that beautiful bird. So, I waited to end to give you my title. The title of my speech is Yisrayl Hawkins and the True Whippoorwills of the House of Yahweh. Yahweh bless you all, and at this time, if you'll all please stand. I have the wonderful honor to turn it over to a great priest in Yahweh's house and a dear friend, because a dear friend is those who keep the laws of Yahweh, the great Kohan David DePass Hawkins.
You may be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, I'd like to know which one of these two concepts is there? Best describes your approach to the subject of belief. Seeing is believing, or believing without seeing? Now, we're going to explore this important subject today because we need to understand why Yahweh expects us to believe and convert. And I add that convert there because it should be understood that the belief that we're talking about is the one that produces conversion. So, does Yahweh expect us to see something before believing? Let's turn to Yachanan chapter 1 verse, and we're going to start out in verse 45. And we're going to move a little bit fast. And that's on page 815. So it says, Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moshe in the law and the prophets wrote of, Yeshua of Nazareth, the son of Yosef." Verse 46. Then Nathanael said to him, "Can anything righteous come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Yeshua saw Nathanael coming to him and said about him, "Behold, a true Israelite in whom is no guile." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Yeshua answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered and said to him, "Teacher, you are the Son of Yahweh. You are the King of Israel." Notice what Yeshua said here. Yeshua answered and said to him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under a fig tree, you believe? You do? That's all it took?" So you see, there's some expectation here of us seeing something to believe. Brethren, it says, then let me finish reading that. It says, "You will see greater things than these." So Yahweh is willing to give us greater things to see. It's part of His mercy. Brethren, we would be lying if we say we don't have a need to see evidence before believing. Let's be real. Yahweh knows that this is how we are because He made us. Now let's just take a look at this in more detail. If you notice, seeing is believing. It's fleshy, it's earthy, it's carnal. And when I say that, I'm not talking in an evil way. I'm talking in a human way. Okay? It's how we are wired up. It's how we're wired up. It's based on what we see, what we feel, what we hear, what we touch and taste. That's how we actually learn things. Okay? It's based mainly on the present. But I want you to understand that Yahweh actually uses this to call us and get us started on repenting. Okay? Now, how Yahweh does this is that He focuses our attention on the things He wants us to see. But He does give us things to see so that we may believe. Okay? Now, believing without seeing is spiritual. It's in the mind's eye. Okay? It's in the mind's eye. And it's based on prophecy, history, rational conclusions. Okay? In Romans 1 verse 20, it says, "For since the creation of the world, the invisible things of Him are clearly seen." You see that? The invisible things are clearly seen. And only when somebody's trying to tell you a lie in broad daylight, like the things that you see here, all this diversity, all this greenery, all these birds that the deacon just told us about, the details of them, oh, that was just evolution. It came from a big bang. No, it should lead us to a certain conclusion. His eternal power and holiness being understood by the things that are written, so that they are without excuse. And brethren, I want you to focus on that word, without excuse. Because Yahweh is giving us something to see, and we are going to be without excuse. We are going to be without excuse. Back to this list here. It keeps us, this believing without seeing, keeps us here to the end. You see, we start off with seeing is believing. But enduring to the end requires believing without seeing. And it produces, one more thing, number 5, we must keep focused. The focusing is no more just Yahweh focusing us as in the beginning with seeing is believing. The focusing here is where we keep focused. We are the ones now who have to keep focused. You see. And if we don't, it will not lead to full conversion. In Romans chapter 1 verse 28, it says, "And so since they did not like to retain Yahweh in their knowledge." You see, not liking to retain Yahweh in their knowledge is where we get off focused. Yahweh gave them over to a reprobate mind. That's what can occur when you are not focused on the things that got us here in the first place. Okay? And the zeal that we had to do those things which are not proper. Now, brethren, some of the greatest men, you can read the rest of it to see what can fill our minds if we don't keep it focused on the things that Yahweh wants us to focus on. You see? You can read the rest of that chapter. But some of the greatest men had a need to see something to enhance their belief, brethren. In Matthew 11, we're going to read verse 2 to 6 on page 733. It says, that's Matthew 11, verse 2. It says, now, when Yachanan the Mercer had heard in prison about the works of Messiah, he sent 2 of his disciples, who said to him, verse 3, are you the one who was to come, or do we look for another? Yeshua answered and said to them, go back and tell Yachanan those things which you see and hear. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the message preached to them. Yahweh gives us something to see. Verse 6 now. Blessed is the man who will not be offended by me. So you can still get offended even though you see these things. Notice that. You can still get offended even if you see these things, if you don't keep it focused. You see? Yahweh has been doing this for the people whom he has called and has been a part of his plan for years. Look at Exodus chapter 3 verse 16, page 47. Yahweh called Moshe and gave him a task to do. And he says, go and gather together. This is Exodus chapter 3 verse 16, page 47. It says, go and gather together the elders of Israel and say to them, Yahweh, the mighty Father of your fathers, the mighty Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and I have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And now he's going to gather his people. Drop down to Exodus chapter 4 verse 1. It says, it's a big task, right? Go before the Pharaoh and so forth and so on. We're not going to read all of it. Okay? So Moshe answered and said, what if they do not believe me or listen to me? Suppose they say, Yahweh has not appeared to you. Then Yahweh said to him, what is that in your hand? And Moshe answered, a staff. And Yahweh said to him, cast it to the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And you know the rest of the story. You know, Yahweh says, stretch forth your hand, pick it up at the tail, and he picked it up. Put your hands in it, in the coat, and pull it out, and it becomes leprous, and put it back in, and it became normal again. Okay? So we see here, Yahweh is willing to satisfy the need within us that he built within us to see. Understand this. This is also going to be used, Yahweh has used this. This is why we came here instead of the Catholic Church. Okay? Because we could see Catholic Church is not it. Okay? Now, Yahweh has made it his duty to provide something for his people to see so that they would believe. Let's go to Yachanan 20 now. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. Yachanan 20, that's page 838. We're going to read in verse 24 here. It says, but Thomas, hard-believing Thomas, one of the 12, was not with them when Yeshua came. So the other disciples said to him, we have seen Yeshua. But he said to them, unless I see in his hand the print of the nails, and put my finger in the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Now, brethren, he should have seen the things already that Yachanan, that Yeshua told Yachanan's servants. The blind see, the deaf hear, the dead raised. He should have seen all that. And notice how bold he was when he said that. You know, Yeshua wasn't there. Yeshua wasn't there, right? Notice this. And remember this when we speak and we murmur. Okay? Somebody is listening. In verse 26, now 8 days later, his disciples again were within, and Thomas was with them. Yeshua came, the doors were shut. He just appeared. Okay? And stood in the midst and said, peace be to you, Shalom Akalem. Verse 27. Then he said to Thomas, he went straight for Thomas. He went straight for him and says, reach out your finger here and see my hands, and reach out your hand and put it in my side. And do not be faithless, but believe in. You see that? That was mercy right there. Then Thomas answered and said to him, my teacher, my king. Yeshua said to him, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. This brings us down to us and the Christians. Christians say they believe. So why they're not here? Okay? Their lens was not focused on the things that Yahweh has given us to see today. You see that? That has to take place. Has Yahweh given us something to see, brethren? I want to get into that. I don't know what time I have. I don't think I'm going to get into all of it. But I'll try. But has He given us something to see, which has made it completely reasonable for us to believe all that the prophets, all the other prophecies that have yet to be fulfilled? Yes, 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 absolutely. What Yahweh has given us in these last days is undeniable. So undeniable that only a fool, brethren, would not believe the rest of it. Brethren, this is why Yahweh expects us to believe and to convert. It's an expectation. Be careful when you come to the house of Yahweh, because the things that you hear and the things that you see, you're going to be responsible for it. Don't get the impression, brethren, that He is asking us to accomplish this monumental task that is next to impossible to perform, and He'll understand if you don't overcome. And He'll accept you as you are. No, brethren, Yahweh expects us to believe and convert. In 1 Corinthians 6 verse 9, it can read like this. Do you not believe that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Do not cause yourself to be an unbeliever. Neither the fornicators, nor the God worshippers, nor adulterers, nor men who commit sexual perversions with boys, or men who commit sexual perversions with other men. Brethren, do not take the weekly confessions that we do for granted. Don't take it for granted. They're not a license to sin. And I want the young people to understand that as well. You know, we're training them up in righteousness to come up and live righteously. But you can get the impression that confessions is there, you just rattle through it. And then with no thought, having every intention of going out and doing the same thing again. Okay? That's not the case. Don't do it. Verse 11, it says, and such were some of you. You see, we are supposed to have turned and convert. You see? Turn and convert. Brethren, Yahweh expects us to believe and convert. Now, what are some of the things that He has given us to see? What are some of the things that He has given us to see? Well, He has given us something to see that Daniel didn't see. Daniel had to wait. It says in Daniel chapter 12 verse 4, "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words." And what Yahweh has given us to see, man, it took a lot of planning. Don't make this seem like insignificant, like you had to see somebody raised from the dead. What Yahweh has given us to see, brethren, is incredible. Okay? "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the time of the end." He has given us that, the last days. That's one of the things he gave us. By virtue of being born in these last days, we could see and understand this part here. Many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. He gave us the last days so that we could see. And you go down here, this is what Pastor is trying to show us. He's giving us visuals. The buggy, what do you call it, the cart over here, and the little house with Maggie May outside. Okay, that shows you what it was just a few years ago and how knowledge has increased now. Okay, Daniel couldn't understand that, but we can see that we are in the last days. That's one thing. Okay, what else? Can you see it? Believe it, brethren. If you turn to Isaiah 34, verse 16, it says, "Search out the book of Yahweh and read. Not one of these will be neglected, for it is written, Yahweh is their shepherd, they shall not want, for his mouth has commanded it, and his spirit has gathered them." Now, the house have done a lot of work concerning this to show us how Yahweh has gone through much. I mean, look at how the book of Yahweh was tried to withhold it from the people. Okay? And you would think that, man, it's impossible. Okay? And there's a lot of articles about this. I have this article here. Why Christians were denied access to their Bible. And this guy wrote this article for some friends who was questioning a talk that he gave. And he just wanted to cite some facts. One of these things, one of the facts here, he says, the decree of the Council of Toulouse, 1229, Y-A-Y. Is that it? After Yeshua. A-Y. "We prohibit also that the laity," that's the regular people, "should be permitted to have the books of the Old or New Testament. But we must strictly forbid their having any translation of these books." And then he cites something else. Ruling of Council of Tarragona, 1234. But no one may possess the books of the Old or New Testament in the Romance language, and if anyone possesses them, he must turn them over to the local bishop within 8 days of promulgation of his decree, so they may be burned. I can't go through all of that right now, but you know the extent to which Satan was trying to hold this back, but she wasn't successful. You see, we have it, brethren, and it's not going anywhere. The next thing is in Zephaniah 3, verse 9. "Yes, at that time I will return to the peoples the pure word, the law and the prophets, so that all of them may call upon the name of Yahweh." That's what got me. That's what I heard, and that's why I came. Okay? You can hear it. Okay, you can see it. You can see it too. Okay? "And serve him with one accord. brethren, Yahweh has restored his name. Can you see that? And I'm going to have to see you another day. So, there's a lot more coming. The house of Yahweh, the two witnesses, and I wanted to get into that. But you see them. You're in it. You're in the house of Yahweh, brethren. Yahweh has gone through a lot to show you these things because he knows, brethren, that we operate on seeing is believing. But with this seeing of what you have seen, you are expected to believe all the rest of it that you can't even see right now. Okay? So may Yahweh bless your understanding. And if you all please stand, I present to you the great Khan, Kiefer Reynolds. Okay.
Praise Yahweh. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated, and may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Whew. I tell you, the great Kohan just left off right in the right spot. You know, it's always amazing to me how Yahweh puts these things together, you know, because all the messages, you'll hear little things out of them, you know, as we go on. What I wanted to talk about is a subject. It's called a continuous load path. A continuous load path. And we're going to explain that here in a little bit. But remember, Yahweh is going to convince the heavens and the earth that mankind is fit to rule the universe. You know, and he's doing this through his plan, which is the completion of this house. Now, I've wanted to, for a long time, you know, show how the structure of a house actually works. You know, because there's so much in the scriptures that are speaking on this subject. And I know, you know, if you don't deal with this very often, you know, there's certain things that are said and you really don't get the picture of it. So, speaking of seeing and believing, I brought pictures to show to show this, and I think maybe, you know, we will see and understand together, you know, just how awesome this is that Yahweh is building this house, a house that is not able to be moved. You know, a house with a very sure, rock solid foundation that can in no way be moved. So, in building, you know, there's a term that describes the different pressures that are applied to each member of the house, and it's called a load. So if you go ahead and just turn with me to Matthew 11, and we'll be looking on page 738. Matthew 11, and think of that when you read this 29 through 30. He says, "Take up my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart." Now, please remember what Pastor's been teaching us about this humility. You know, this is our perfect example. There gets no better example than the one that this man, our great high priest, has set before us. You know, that humility is absolutely essential to make the connection that we need to make here. And you will find rest for your souls. And then in verse 30, notice he says, "For my yoke, the law of Yahweh, is easy, and my burden," that is the load that must be carried, "is light." Now, we're going to show how it's light, you know, because this burden on any one particular member, that member would fail. All right? The house works together as one solid structure when a load is applied to it. So each member is rated to carry, you know, it should be able to carry, you know, a certain load, but a house needs a continuous load path to be able to withstand extreme wind pressure that is placed against it. So I got some drawings here to explain that. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, okay, great. So the little red squigglies, those would represent wind. All right, so wind is pushing against the house, and you see how each member, the blue outline, you know, lines are directions in which those members might be swayed back and forth in a windstorm. And you know what you end up with, if the house is not firmly established, it'll do typically one of three things, where you'll get an uplift, where you know you'll lose the roof because this connection fails. All right, you can get racking, which is an interesting one, because your connections more or less hold together, but it doesn't have the support from the adjoining members for it to be locked in place. And then over here you have this shear where the entire house is pushed off the foundation. And that takes place, during a large windstorm. So we're going to go over what that means, in the scriptures. Now remember, each building project starts with a plan. This plan, we're the finishing part of this plan that the whole earth was created for. When you look at the earth that we're standing on and the beautiful creatures like you saw earlier, and all the detail that Yahweh's gone into to creating each and every little thing, understand that that's for us. The whole thing was done for us to bring about this house that, Yahweh shows will have a remarkable position here in His universe. But now remember, every building starts with a plan. So we're going to turn to Matthew 16:18. I know you all know this, but we're going to read it anyway. This is page 744, and he says, And I also say to you who are Kepha, whose name means rock, that upon this rock, that is Yahweh unity, I will build this house. Now notice this is Yeshua doing the speaking. He says, I will build this house. Remember Zechariah 6:12 and 13, which shows that he's doing this together with the branch. With the branch. So, of course, when you begin to build a house, there's a lot of preliminary work. Once you have the plan, you go to go out and build the house, there's a lot of dirt work involved. You got to establish your perimeters of where the house is going to go. You have to prepare the dirt to accept the foundation. And, in these days, we typically do it with concrete. Back when these scriptures were written, and it's still in some parts of the world done today, your foundation was large stones. And in order to build this foundation, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start somewhere. And when the scriptures talk about the cornerstone, understand that's the beginning of the foundation there, that it catches the load of two adjoining walls, but it sets the direction of the building, it sets the elevation for the rest of the foundation. It's the starting point of the entire foundation. And that's shown to us in the scriptures here. If you turn to 1 Corinthians 15. Like I said, I was going over this, and it's like there's so much in the scriptures about this. I had to really snip it down because I could be here for days explaining this subject. But 1 Corinthians 15, found on page 898. 15:21. He says, For since death comes by man comes also the resurrection of the dead. And for as in Adam all die, in the same way all who are as Messiah will be made alive. And every man in his own order. Now, in the second book of Israel 3 and verse 96, Pastor said that was that order is referring to the time or calling that Abel, being the first righteous priest, and Yahweh had these callings to show that absolutely nothing could possibly turn his 144,000 priesthood away from righteousness. This is what's being displayed before the heavens and the earth right now, is Yahweh showing this point, that nothing is going to be able to turn this house. And we know that outcome. We know that outcome. So our struggle right now is to remain in this house and to allow Yahweh to complete our overcoming. And the only way to do that is through humility. We can't be a part of this house and continually fight the message of the kingdom. At some point we have to be completely submissive to the knowledge and understanding that comes from this house. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but keep it in mind. Let's go to Hebrews 12. There's another great scripture on this subject, talking about our great cornerstone, that in Hebrews 12:2, found on page 951. He said, looking to Yeshua, the first who was led and perfected by the faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the sacrifice, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of Yahweh. He was the first. And then look at verse 3. For consider him who endured such opposition against himself from sinners, so that you would not become weary and faint in your minds. You know, as we go through these tests and trials, there's always that tendency to get wore out. I just can't take this anymore. You know, don't allow yourself to grow weary. You know, wash your face, start again. Make, this moment your new day and say, whatever took place, it took place. I can't fix that. But from here on, I'm going to give this my all, because, this is something this is an investment that you're never going to regret putting your effort into. Praise Yahweh. You yourselves have not resisted bloodshed, striving against sin. You have not yet resisted bloodshed, striving against sin. Think of that. But when you think that times are tough, think of what our forefathers endured in bringing this message, and like the great Kohan was speaking, allowing for this book of Yahweh to be passed through one generation to another. Now let's look at 1 Corinthians real quick. 1 Corinthians 3. And we can go ahead and start at verse 9. He says, for we are the laborers together of Yahweh, and you are the tillage of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh. And according to the mercy that Yahweh has given to me as a wise chief architect, I have laid the foundation, and another builds upon it. And of course, but let every man be careful how he builds on it, for no other foundation can anyone lay than that which has already been laid. What Pastor has done is shown us this foundation. We didn't understand, we didn't know any of this before we came here. You got to get that out of your mind. Like, well, I knew this, and no, you didn't know anything. Just stop. We came here as dumb as a skunk, and you know what? That's fine. We were humble enough for Yahweh to keep us here all this time and to teach us. And we stumble and we fall and we get up and we learn and we learn and we learn. And eventually you come to the point where you say, aha, I've learned that I didn't know anything. And that's a great point to come to, because only then can you start truly building. As long as you think that you got a better way or all this or that, you're just, we'll continue to have patience with you. But as the work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. The day will bring it to light. In building, you have to be aware of certain things that will cause damage to your structure. Of course, water is one of the biggest ones. When you're building a house, a shed, or anything, you're always trying to figure out, okay, I need to keep water out from the members of this house, because water is going to bring that damage. If it's a wood structure, it's going to bring rot and decay, and even with stone, it can wear down, your grout and all those types of things. And then it creates an environment for either termites or of course mildew, mold, and rot. And rot is a one that I'm always I'm always working against. As somebody who deals with wood all the time, rot is like the main enemy. So it's like I always associate this in my head as what we're guarding against here in the house of Yahweh. Because we have to guard and keep this message. And the house is built then, of course, upon this foundation. The builder sets the walls in place with the use of the plummet. Now, if we turn to Zechariah 4, Zechariah 4. Again, another one I know you all know, but we need to be reminded. When we're talking about a house, it's important that we set in our houses reminders. We need reminders everywhere, because we tend to forget. We might hear, understand, and receive a teaching, and that's great. But if you don't rehearse and reflect upon that teaching, it just kind of goes away. And then it gives room for other things to be brought in the forefront of our mind. So in our houses, If you notice, when you come to the 44, you see signs everywhere. And the signs are not of paintings of a bunch of weird things like you see in the Vatican. But you see a lot of scriptures. You see scriptures and teachings everywhere. And we look upon this and we're reminded. We're reminded why we're here. We're reminded what we're doing. So this, I liken to the ability to plan ahead and to shed water, to keep it out of this house, is to have preventative measures, to give it a path somewhere to go to where that water doesn't sit on your building, right? And I know the tests and trials have to come. Sometimes you need a hard rain to know if your building leaks or not. So, when the hard rain comes and you say, oh, there's a leak there. Ooh, that's a waterfall there. That you got to go and address these issues, because if you let water continually get in your house, it's going to destroy something, right? So we can't allow sin into this house. It's very important that we, in this same way, we guard and keep our house. Be very, very diligent to guard and keep this information, the wisdom that Yahweh gives us. But in Zechariah 4, so, we're living stones, as the scripture says. In Zechariah 4, in verse 9, he says, the hands of Zerubbabel, of course this is our overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins, has laid the foundation of this house. That is, he's shown us this foundation that was laid, that the apostles and the prophets with Yeshua Messiah as the chief cornerstone. Right? He's laid the foundation of this house, and his hands will also finish it, and you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me. For who has despised the day of small things? They will rejoice when they see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel, and the complete knowledge and understanding. Remember, Proverbs says that Yahweh, He reserves sound understanding for those who protect and guard and keep this wisdom, right? So they will rejoice when they see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. Here's a picture of a typical stone wall with grout. In this point, the grout kind of helps as a connection with the stones. But you see the plummet. I know it looks like a carrot on a stick. But he's shown us that too. And I'm thankful for it, because we do need to see it. And there's been no better painter in the history of mankind than Yisrayl Hawkins. He's painted this kingdom for us. He's shown us, this great beauty of where we're going and what it actually is. Because those are connections. Those teachings that he gives us are connections. But the string line here that the plummet is attached to, it gives a guide as to straight up and down to where your building has something to go by. And there's a lot of different applications for that, but that's just a one use where you might be able to see it. A lot of times in stonework, or in brickwork, that you'll see this. That plummet being used to set your rocks, to make sure that your house is straight up and down, because when it is, that load of the structure then is efficiently brought to the foundation. When it's leaning, it has a tendency to want to fall. You're putting that pressure in another direction. When it's straight up and down, all of that weight transfers to the foundation, and that's what it's all about. We have a perfect foundation that we need to stand upon here in the house of Yahweh. There's no need for another foundation. There's no need to go out and find another builder. There's no need to go anywhere else. It's all right here. So speaking of this plummet, let's go to Isaiah 28 and see what it actually is. Isaiah 28. And we'll look at verses 16. He said, therefore, this is what Yahweh, this is found on page 546. Therefore, this is what Yahweh the Father says, behold, I lay in Zion a foundation stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. And look, he who believes will not be ashamed. We have nothing to be ashamed of with this, with setting our full trust into this foundation. Now look at verse 17. And I will also set justice the measuring line and righteousness the plummet. So look, the hail will not sweep away the refuge of lies, the waters will not overflow the hiding place, and the covenant of death will be annulled. Okay, so this is the subject that it's showing here, and of course that plummet is in the hands of the builder. So after the foundation is laid, that plummet is used continuously throughout the building process to set different members of the house and to make sure and then to double check. A lot of times before a house is fully all together, your walls will sway all over the place. Somebody bumps into this and you had it all perfectly straight, but then something took place. So the builder has to continuously go back and double check and to double check. And I look at that, a lot of the same way that we are, and that it takes a long time before, we really see the results of the work that's done. Pastor's building this house with people, and people are a very finicky product. I know what to expect out of wood. I know what to expect out of rocks, but people are unpredictable sometimes. And you think you got everything right, and then that person does something really, really strange. And so you realize, okay, I got to go back and do this. But, a lot of time is spent with individuals before you ever see the fruits of your labor with them, so, but as people here, for us, it's all about the connections, because in a house, that's what makes it and keeps it all in one piece. And this is like a diagram showing like in a typical 2-story house that you're tied into the foundation at the bottom. This connection. Here's the connection with the first floor, and then the connection at the roof. Well, the teachings, as the proverb says, your teachings are like well-driven nails. Those are our connections. Those nails are our connections. And I need to just quickly turn to Psalms 15. But when you think of unity in a structure, remember 777. Remember Pastor's dream. Remember the signs that say 777 in unity. And think of Amosia 3:7. Because that's what it's all about. That there is no other work. But in Psalms 15, it shows us who will abide in this house. He who walks uprightly, according to that plummet. Verse 3, to his brother he does not take up a reproach. He does not gossip and slander. Verse 4, he will stand who despises this vile, evil, wicked person. In verse 5, he puts not his money into usury, but he that does these things, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. Never be moved. And that's what it's all about. With talking about a sure foundation and a sure structure, we have to humble ourselves to make the connection. And Yahweh shows us how to do it. We have to make ourselves ready to do that, though. So if y'all please stand at this time, I'm out of time. And I will turn the services over to the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. All right, we're going to get right into this. I have a lot to cover. All right, last week there was a news article that came out, and it was something being given, a speech, or actually a meeting being given by Republican Representative Diane Black of Tennessee. Now, if you saw this, you might understand what she was talking about, but she was speaking on the effects of violence and things that we see in the media and things that we see in entertainment and how it's affecting the outcome. It says, Representative Diane Black of Tennessee recently cited pornography along with the deterioration of family and violent movies as contributing factor to gun violence in schools. It says Black made the remarks during a listening session with local pastors last week, according to audio obtained from the Huffington Post posted Tuesday. Now listen, she was speaking to pastors, all right? They have no solution, right? These are the people that Yahweh said walk about in darkness, right? They have no understanding. They don't shine as bright as those who have been trained in Yahweh's house. We are the light to this world. There is a solution to help stop this problem, But it's not going to come from the people that are the root cause of the problem. We have to educate, and we have to be the ones, the House of Yahweh has to be the ones that is sent to these people to educate them, to help change the outcome of what's going on. She continued to say, why do we see kids being so violent? What's out there? What makes them do that? Black said, because as a nurse, I go back to the root cause. But she's not understanding what the root cause is. The very people she's speaking to are the root cause. Those who do away with Yahweh's laws and those who don't stand up for Yahweh's laws. She says, I think it's a couple of things, Black said, listing off deterioration of the family and violent movies before mentioning pornography. She says, it's available. All of this is available without any parental guidance. Very key words, parents. All this is available without parental guidance. She adds, and I think this is a big part of the root cause, that we see so many young people that have mental illness get caught in these places. Now, this is nothing new. We know these things. In the Building of the Moral Excellence, on page 61, it's behind the scenes. Two major sources of influence in today's society are television and movies, although both of these forms of entertainment can have some positive influence in the modern day culture. There are more likely to be sources of negative influences. There's a lot more negative influences than positive. All right. Now, I had a parent explain to me one time that the only thing they allow their child to watch is Animal Planet. What's wrong with Animal Planet? So I decided to sit down and watch Animal Planet just to see. And there was a show on there. The guy's name was Jeff. That's who the host was. And he was sitting up in a tree wearing short shorts in a tree full of monkeys. All right. Something inappropriate took place in this tree full of monkeys. Instead of taking this out to where children didn't see it, they turned it into a joke. They turned it into a joke that a simple little child wouldn't understand. But the simple ability to plant that idea inside of a child's mind is how this system works. It starts with that little seed to make something look so innocent, but in the end it brings forth destruction. It says the amount of violence on television is on the rise. By the time an average child is 18 years old, he or she would have viewed 200,000 acts of violence on television, including many scenes of murder, theft, and rape. All of this information is taken into the brain and becomes a permanent, get that word, a permanent part of the conscious and subconscious mind. It says, chew on this. More than 1,000 studies confirm that exposure to heavily doses of television, violence, increase aggressive behavior, particularly in males. On page 64, it's the violence continues. Another significant source of violence in the entertainment is video games. Themes including allowing players to work for the mob, hijack cars, and kill cops and civilians. Other video games allow the player to be a part of the mob and run a prostitution ring, do gangster-style executions, and sell drugs. Other objectives include running civilians over in high-speed car chases and being a gang leader, and who have the power to execute other gang members and other member rival gangs. Now, this would never take place inside Yahweh's house among Yahweh's people. It has. It has in the past. Right? As a young man, I partook in it. We have to learn from the foolishness and from the stupidity that came before us. Young men, young women, you have to have the ability to understand that Yahweh allowed us to go through these things not only so that we could have empathy for you, but that we could set the example for you and tell you these things are not going to bring about righteousness. These things are not going to bring about a kingdom. We are here for one reason and one reason only, and that's to bring forth righteousness. It says, not as harmless as you may think on page 65. Witnessing repeated acts of violence, which include verbal and physical aggression, murder, rape, and theft, has been proven to have the adverse effects in the thoughts and actions of children and young adults. Numerous studies confirm that witnessing these acts leads to what is known as desensitization. All right? Desensitization means you desensitize something. You make something to where it no longer matters to it. All right? You can... in printing, we used to desensitize the rollers. All right, when we did printing, when we ran the printing presses, the printing press rollers would become sensitized. Right, where the ink wouldn't stick to the rollers anymore. So we actually used a chemical called desensitization. Right, it was a desensitizer that would pull all the bad stuff out of the rollers to where the ink would start sticking to the rollers again. All right, when we're working with animals, we teach them to be desensitized to where they no longer allow things in the environment to stress them out. It's the same thing that Satan is doing. Entertainment and this entire system is being used to desensitize us to the fact that this is a normal life now. These things no longer matter. We can see somebody shot beside of us on the street, and it's not going to matter to us anymore. What we see inside this system, what we see taking place in the news, is exactly what Satan wanted to bring about here in these last days. And I'm going to prove it. Numerous studies confirm that witnessing these acts leads to what is known as desensitization. In other words, seeing people get hurt in the movies and video games lessens one's ability to care about people and when we get hurt in real life. In fact, desensitization also leads to a greater likelihood of people will respond with verbal and physical aggression when angered. Violence then becomes accepted as an appropriate way to deal with situations that are frustrating or upsetting. And we know violence is never the answer. Force, if you think force is the answer to achieve peace, you're completely mistaken. That's the way of the Catholic Church, and it has never brought peace. In the 7th book of Israel, on page 28, this is chapter 3, Pastor says, now listen, here in verse 7. Now listen, you've got to get this first. Yahweh created the earth to use in making a family. The only reason this planet was even created was to make a family, to make us, to make a being, a group of beings who choose to do righteousness, who learn to love it. That's what he created it for, to make a house, a kingdom for mankind, not from the original sons that he already had, but for mankind made in his own image. He's making us in his own image to where we would see his way and forever guard that way. And as was promised to Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, to guard and keep this way, and you will live forever. Well, they said they got tempted by Satan, who Yahweh knew was there. All right, now right inside your mind, all right, I can already see it. People are automatically imagining the person sitting in front of them or the person sitting behind them or the person sitting beside them. That's the Satan that was put here to test me. That's not who was put here to test you. Satan has a perfect system, and Satan walks around us in certain ways through entertainment, through the desire to sin. These things are fed, and these are how we are driven from the garden. This is what causes people to leave Yahweh's house. Well, they said they got tempted by Satan, who Yahweh knew was there. He put her in the garden with them, and they were driven out of the garden then because they turned to sin and fell short. Now, I pointed this out last night in law class while I was teaching it. If you look right here, see this word right here? Greatest. Cover that part up. Great. All right? This is going to become the greatest work in the house of Yahweh. This is the great house of Yahweh. But how do you obtain that? Test. We're not going to make it easy. This is not going to be something where we just waltz right on into Yahweh's kingdom. To become the greatest in Yahweh's kingdom, we're going to be tested. We're going to be tried. And we have to prove without a doubt that we can be trusted. That we can be trusted to go out and lead by example. Because that's the greatest form of teaching, is being a leader by leading by example. All right, so let's go ahead and cover this and see exactly how Satan walks among us. Media violence. Now, this was given in the 11th Roman month of 2009. This is from the Council on Communications and Media. Exposure in the media, including television, movies, music, and video games, represents a significant risk to the health of children and adolescents. Extensive research evidence indicates that the media violence can contribute to aggressive behavior, desensitization, to violence, nightmares, and fear of being harmed. It says, although shooting in schools around the world periodically prompt politicians and general public to focus their attention on the influence of media violence, the medical community has been concerned with this issue since the 1950s. The evidence is now clear and convincing. Media is one of the causal factors of real-life violence and aggression. Therefore, pediatricians and parents need to take action. So they're trying to stop it before it starts. But we already know children learn it from in the womb. They learn these things from their parents. In 1972, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a special report to the public health effects of media violence and was based on the growing and nearly unanimous body of evidence. 10 years later, the National Institute of Mental Health issued a comprehensive review of the research on media violence and its effects, which outlined concerns about children's psychological health. At the Congressional Public Health Summit in the year of 2000, the American Academy of Pediatrics was joined by the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. and the American Psychologists Association in issuing an unprecedented joint statement in the impact of entertainment and violence in children. Also in 2000, the Federal Bureau of Investigation released a report on shootings in schools that stated media violence is a risk factor. In 2003, the panel of media violence experts convened that the National Institute of Mental Health, at the request of the U.S. Surgeon General, published its comprehensive report on the effects of media violence on the youth, which revealed media violence to be a significant causal factor in aggression and violence. So significant, all right? Significant means it's playing a high role in this, and they're starting to see it. Exposure. Now, exposure to these things. The effects of having television in a child's bedroom are only the beginning to be studied. He says, but the early indications are alarming. Children with television in their bedroom increases their television viewing by approximately 1 hour per day. The risk of obesity increases 31%. Of course, if you're not being active, if you're not doing something, if you're not working, you're going to start becoming obese. And the risk of smoking doubles. So they're actually the risk of falling into habits, the risk of falling into the ways of this world actually doubles. In addition, the children who have television in their bedroom and parents are less able to monitor what is seen. All right, now parents, if our children have any form of entertainment and we are not able to visually see what is going on, and if we don't have the energy or the effort to put in to make sure what our children are doing online, then we need to seek counsel. Because these children are falling short, because as leaders, we are not setting the example. Children emulate who they see. We need to make sure these children are emulating the witness in these last days. We need to make sure they are learning to follow a pattern that's going to bring forth righteousness and not sin. A large portion of children's media exposure includes acts and violence that are witnessed or virtually perpetrated by young people. By 18 years of age, the average young person will have viewed an estimated 200,000 acts of violence on television alone. Now, we just read that from the Peaceful Solution also. It says the National Television Violence Study evaluated 10,000 hours of broadcast programming from 1995 to 1997 and revealed that 61% of the programming portrayed violence. Much of it is in entertaining and glamorized manner. All right, now there it is. Entertaining and glamorized. It becomes desirable. The violence. It becomes something that you seek after. Now this is very key right here. The highest proportion of violence was found in children's shows. All right, now we learned about the cartoons of the world. We learned what these things did. Maybe we didn't understand how evil these things were. Of all animated feature films produced in the United States between 1937 and 1999, remember 1999, that's a very key year. How much of this do you think portrayed violence? Let's see it right here. Can you zoom in? There you go. See it right here. From 1937 to 1999, you see this right here? 100%. 100% portrayed violence, and the amount of violence with the intent to injure and has increased through the years. So they did this study from 1937 to 1999 on children's entertainment. The simple stuff that parents let their children partake in every single day. 100% of it proved to be promoting violence. Not just a little bit, but 100%. More than 80% of the violence portrayed in the contemporary music videos is perpetrated an attractive protagonist against the disproportionate number of women and blacks. So similarly, teenagers' music has become more violent, especially in rap music. All right, so you see these things, not just rap music, but all music is violence. All right, it promotes violence. It's bringing forth these things, but it puts inside the brain of sin. It brings forth hatred. It brings forth violence. You know, these things aren't of Yahweh that we see in this world, and we allow these things to be included in our life. When we allow these things to be promoted, when we promote them ourselves, then we are participants in this. We are bringing forth a different kingdom than the righteous kingdom right here. On page 40 of this same book of the 17th book of Israel, in chapter 3, this is verse 124. In verse 3, now pastor was speaking of those who walk around in darkness. All right, those who walk around in darkness, they have no understanding because they don't understand how to apply the laws of Yahweh. As like Yeshua said, they haven't read. They don't read these things, therefore they don't have the ability to apply them. They have need of a teacher in these last days. But he was speaking here in Daniel in chapter 12, and we'll look at verse 3 and verse 124 in the book of Israel. He says, "And those who are wise will shine. Those who are teachers will shine as the brightness of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness." That should be the reason that you're here, is to turn many to righteousness. So young children, if you have a question as to why am I here, older children, if we have a question, why am I here? We are here to turn many to righteousness. That is why we're here in Yahweh's house. That's the reason all of us should be here. Praise Yahweh. And here he says, if you came here for a different reason, if you came here to get your songs heard in the house of Yahweh, you came here for the wrong reason, and you probably won't stay long. But if you came here to seek Yahweh, seek salvation at His house, you're here for the right reason. You're here for the right reason if you came here to seek salvation at Yahweh's house. Parents, if you know your children are on the internet and they are promoting violent music, whether it's rap music or any music, but when there's music that involves bloodying up people and violence, we're not teaching our children to bring forth righteousness. We are teaching our children to rise up like gods. This will not be in Yahweh's kingdom. We were brought here to bring forth a righteous seed, a righteous offering before Yahweh. We're not bringing forth the offering that Cain offered. This will not be in Yahweh's house. This cannot be in Yahweh's house. These things were driven out from the garden of Yahweh. If we continue to follow in these patterns, allowing these things to be promoted, and not being a leader and setting the example and making sure as a parent, we have the responsibility to make sure we are monitoring these things, and we are making sure our children are coming to Yahweh's house and being educated on how to properly conduct ourselves. If we don't know how to educate our children, then we need to be coming with our children, because we need to learn in unity. The time's getting short. All right. Lately, we've been seeing a rise in suicides. So all this combines together. Now, I said, remember the year 1999. Right? That's when they started doing the study. Right? Up to 1937, up to 1999, they did a study of violence in the movies and violence for children and stuff. So here we see suicide rates are up 30% since 1999. So since they finished this study, suicides have went up by 30%. Now, if you'll look here at the map, these darkest parts, that's not 30%. That's 38 to 58%. That's how much suicide has risen up inside here. All right, all these other states, Texas. All right, so we're right at the 30%. All right, here in Nevada, they said the suicide rate was so high in Nevada, there was no point of managing the difference in it. All right. It's always been one of the highest states in suicide. All right? What goes in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? Well, that's the problem. All these things that are promoting sin, all these things we see people choosing. People are giving up. Outside the house of Yahweh, this world has no hope. So these people in the world that have been relying on this entertainment to give them joy and give them excitement, it's brought them down to where now they have no hope. They have no joy. And when these things run out, what you're seeing a lot of high influential gods of Hollywood starting to take their lives. They've been taking their lives for many years. But why? Because it's not entertaining to them. They're the ones that are in it. They're the ones producing it. It's not entertaining to them, so they can't use those things to help pull their mind off the stress of everyday life. These things are desirable. Yahweh put us here, and just like the deacon said that first started speaking, Yahweh gave us a carnal mind, and that carnal mind desires sin. Well, I haven't watched entertainment in years, but I still have stress. I still have anxiety. I still have all these problems. Sin is like a drug. When you start to pull away from it, when you start to separate yourself from it, you start having withdrawals. You start wanting to go back and fall back into that easy pattern that was so easy in Egypt. I didn't have to put any effort into doing these things in Egypt. But when I come to Yahweh's house tells me I need to change myself. I need to start changing who I am and become a better person. That takes effort. That takes endurance. That takes true grit. That's why we're here. Because if we can do it with ourselves, if we can prove during this deepest, darkest time of sin that we can overcome these things, and we can actually change the desire of our heart to where we no longer seek after the illegal lust of the flesh, we can convince the 2 billion people coming after us that they can do the same thing. Because we proved it can be done. And it was done by choice. Free will. We chose to leave sin and come into Yahweh's house and love one another. That's true love. Out of this 30%, this rise of 30%, only about half of these people died by suicide, had known a mental condition. So only half of them were already known that they had a mental condition. While many cases of mental illness have been diagnosed, the CDC also noted that relationship stress, financial troubles, and substance abuse were contributing trends. Suicides are rising across the U.S., and suicide is more than a mental health condition. States and communities can adopt comprehensive strategies to prevent suicide. The solution is right here before us. The only way it doesn't work is if you refuse to use it. It's here. If the representative that was speaking to those pastors had this book right here and was able to tell them, here's the solution to fix your problems, this world could start to turn around. But they're groping around in darkness. Middle-aged adults had the largest number of suicides, and particularly the high increase in suicide rates. But the CDC team found almost no group is exempt from the rise of suicides. Except, now why do you think this is? Except people over the age of 75. People over the age of 75. So right now, when this came out, it'd be about 1943, all right? How many 75-year-olds do you see walking around on their iPhones all day or texting all day or on entertainment all day and completely engulfed in foolishness? Not too many. These things were brought about to start pulling our minds off the Scriptures. These things were brought about to pull our minds off the Scriptures and get our minds onto entertainment, to get our minds onto ourselves. The older generation didn't have this growing up. But the next generation after them, they had it. Right? Television, entertainment, these things came about. The generation now, you got a cell phone, you've got entertainment 24/7. You've got whatever sin you desire right there with you. It's there. Now, I've had a parent tell me, I played violent video games, I watched all those movies, and I didn't do the stupid thing my son's doing. But when you watched those movies, when you played those violent video games, you made a permanent part in your body that you produced into that child. And if we don't teach the child not to do it, they're going to pass the same thing down to their children. We're seeing a decline in morality because Yahweh's having His breeding program right now. Satan's having hers too. Genetics and environment. That's what we're made up of. We have to learn that no matter what our genetics are, even if we're predispositioned to be a violent person, we can use the environment that Yahweh is giving us, the structured environment here in Yahweh's house, learn to apply it and learn to change what we want to become. We are free moral agents, and we have the ability to decide, I don't like that bastard I put in that watery grave anymore. I want to become a new man. I want to become a new woman. I want to be a person that brings many to righteousness by my example. It says suicide rates have increased in every state since 1999, with the exception of Nevada. But Nevada has always long had one of the highest suicide rates in the country. He says that may be part is because it's so difficult to get mental health care, said Dr. Jack Russell. He says, yet even his team sometimes has problems finding help for people. Now here's a doctor, right? Here's the darkness that you see involved in the world. He says, yet his team sometimes has problems finding help for people. I think I'm reasonably well connected, and about a year ago, a friend of mine reached out to me, and he was feeling more sad, more anxious than usual, Roselle said. It took me days to get him into an appointment with someone. He said, it's a problem. Even when people do have treatment, Roselle said, it may be difficult to find the right approach and even find time and money to continue. And here was his solution. The first medication doesn't always work. And sometimes you have to find a second or a third one. This is that system. This is what Revelation is speaking of when it's talking about this system that continually promotes these things to bring forth death, to bring forth a lack and decline of morality. So their last option, after going through the first medication, the second medication, and the third medication, and whatever effects the first medication and the second medication had on you, is seek a therapist. Seek a therapist after all that fails. How about you seek counsel first? How about you seek out Yahweh's counsel first? The counsel of peace. Seek these things out first. Seek the kingdom of Yahweh first. All these other things will be added to us. For what reason you don't connect, you don't link, it puts people in a very tough spot. So for some reason, he says you can't connect, you can't link with people. What creates unity? The law. The same desire for righteousness. It creates unity among us. He says increases mostly seem collateral with economic downturns. Firearms were the most common method used. All right, so firearms. So here you see it. Firearms are the most method used. They were used in nearly half of all the suicides. Even if it's a shotgun to the back, that's limited or ruled as a suicide. He says in 55% of these cases where there was no mental health condition. So pastors told us many times, about the people that just snap, right? They snap, right? They don't just snap, all right, like we think somebody just snapped, all right? There's always warning signs. There's always a reason. And pastors told us. He's told us many times and warned us about, he was mentioning one time about assassins, people that shoot people that kill other people. It's something that's there inside them, and the environment makes it click to where now they become violent. All right? Now, this has been brought up before. 2 genes linked with violent crime. So 2 genes. So genetically, it's inside us. Right? There are genes that are linked to this genetic crime. This was given in 2014. It says the association between genes and violence was strongest for repeat violent offenders. A genetic analysis of almost 900 offenders in Finland was revealed 2 genes associated with violent crime. It says, but they stressed the genes could not be used to screen criminals. Many more genes may be involved in violent behavior, and environmental factors are also known to have a fundamental role. Now, how in Genesis chapter 49 were we warned years in advance on what the behavior would be of the people in these last generations? We were warned well in advance. Well, this is how. Committing severe violent crime is extremely rare in the general population. He says, we're all products of our genetics and the environment, but I don't think that robs us of free will or understanding right and wrong, Dr. Christopher Ferguson stated. He says there are many things that can contribute to a person's mental capacity. He says the only thing that matters is the mental capacity of the individual to understand the consequences of what he or she is doing and whether or not the individual can control his or her own behavior. The peaceful solution creates an atmosphere, if practiced, to where you can start to alter and start to rewrite your DNA. Practicing the laws of Yahweh, these things can change us to where we're bringing forth righteousness, even from our bloodlines. Christopher Ferguson of Stetson University in the U.S. state of Florida agreed. He said it must be remembered that there was not 1 or even 2 genes that by themselves code for violence or crime. No, it's genetics and environment. If our genetics are predispositioned to get us to a certain part, they were predispositioned to get us here. We were called by Yahweh. We were preordained from the ancients of times to be here. Before this earth was even created, we were planned to be here. Now we have to allow the environment that Yahweh put us in to shape us, to mold us, and to create us into that image of Yahweh by submitting and by putting on that white wedding garment of humility. Whatever it is you want me to do, tell me to do it, and I'll go do it. That's how we have to have that type of behavior. If we as adults do it, we as leaders do it, supervisors, the children will follow. Please do it. Praise Yahweh. At this time, I'll go ahead and close, and I'll turn it over to the closing prayer.